What's up guys, John here and welcome back to John Moon Studios. In this week's video we're going to look at a recent score I did for my Instagram page. Let's get right to it. Alright, so what you just heard was the final product of the score. Now we're going to take a look at some of the instruments and plugins I used to create the track. So right up here, I'm using the Super Void part of 8Dio's Supercluster library. I'm using the Outer Space Patch 1, and then inside I'm using the preset Super Void, which is a very nice pad atmospheric sound. So let's take a listen to what it sounds like. I'm gonna go ahead and play the theme of the track. So it also has a very nice tail. As you can see, the release is all the way up, and again, this is exactly how it is out of the box. I haven't moved any knobs for this patch. The effects, there's no effects on it. So again, it's straight out of the box, and you can see that it already sounds professional. It sounds great out of the box. Next, we have an epic lead, and again, most of these are straight out of the box. I haven't really touched them. The effects here, all I have is an EQ, kind of lowering a little bit of the lows, and then boosting a little bit of the highs, and then it does have a little bit of reverb here. So let's go ahead and look at the epic lead. I am doing a little bit of mod wheel control here. So the mod wheel is actually controlling the filter of the epic lead. So here the lead is filtered. And as I move the mod wheel up, it kind of opens up. So this is the lead that kind of doubles the melody towards the middle of the track here. Okay, moving on to the next patch I have here, I have a hard kick, which is just a subby low kick to support the other kick that I have in the track, which we'll look at later. This is part of the Hybrid Tool series of 8Dio. I'm using the Epic Boom Kit. And again, let's see, I have some EQ on it. What I did was I actually rolled off some of the highs to kind of lose a little bit of the punch of the kick, and to leave more of that low subby and mid frequencies in the kick. So let's take a listen to it. So again, if you're listening on a good pair of headphones or through some good speakers, you'll definitely hear the lower frequencies come in. If you're hearing it on a phone, then you probably won't be able to hear it as much, but it's there. It is present there. Okay, moving on to the drum kit. This is where most of my my drum sounds is coming from. And again, this is part of the Hybrid Tools 2 here. So this is part of the Hybrid Tools 2 series. And again, I'm using the drum kit here as the percussion patch. And I am using, okay, so there we have again the sound of the kick All right, so you can see it's missing a little bit of that boominess, but I was able to use the other kick to kind of get some of that sub in there as well. It's a nice trick to do, where you kind of double your kicks. One is a little bit more bright and the other one's a little bit more subby, and you have more control as to where you could place them in the mix, and how present you want either the subbiness or the punchiness. So this is the overall drum kit sound. Alright, so again, this is like straight out of the box. I didn't really do much to it. Here it has a transform, which is pretty much giving it that grittiness. I have a tube preset on here. It kind of gives it that nice, almost kind of like it clips a little bit. So it's a good quality for at least this style of score. And then I also have a little bit of reverb on it. I actually had this up here. Not sure why I reset it. I actually had it all the way up on everything. So right. So here we have the reverb all the way up on everything on these settings of the drum kit. That's a little too much. That sounds better. Okay, so it was somewhere around there. Not sure why it moved, but there we have the drum kit of the song. Next, I have the arpeggios, which is with the Supercluster as well. I'm using the outer space patch number 1, and then I'm using the ISS preset inside of that patch. And again, this is what it sounds like. So let me go ahead and drop the octave here. I'm just pretty much playing a B minor chord, sorry. Alright, so then I pretty much go over all the chords of the song. So I have B minor, A major, and then D major, and then an occasional G major in there as well. So I just outlined those chords using this arpeggio patch. And what I did was I actually added the gate effect here, which gives it this pulsing sound. If I take off the gate, it's just a straight sound. So with the gate and pressing this knob here, I can control the rate and the length of each note, and that kind of gives it a pulsing sound. So inside of the piano roll here, they're slightly long, so you can kind of get a little bit of that pulsing sound as I'm playing as well. Right. So if I take it off, you're going to hear that. You just hear. Right, so it kind of also helps me with keeping the notes a little bit short, since it cuts off with the pulsing of the gate. So next up we have a pulsing bass, which is the same idea. I'm using the same patch, but I dropped it down a couple octaves here. So let's see, I'm playing on C2. Oh, B2, sorry, B1. Here we go. So this is pretty much my bass line. Right, that's my bass line. All it's doing is taking the root of the chords, and we're just playing all the way through. Not really much going on here. We'll talk about the plugins that I used after I cover the sounds here. So I have the same exact pulsing bass, but I have it an octave higher to kind of get some of that, the higher frequencies in the bass line. So I'm playing it an octave higher. So. Just to kind of give the illusion a little bit that the bass line is you could hear it throughout the entire mix, but all I'm really doing is doubling the bass line here, and I actually use the degrader effect, which kind of gives it a little bit more of distortion sound. in order to hear that bass sound come in, and you don't really lose it when the note drops too low. It kind of just stays prominent throughout there. So next up we have some taiko swells, and I have 3 taiko swells because I was a little lazy to use a little bit of automation, but I used 3 different taiko swells, and I kind of put them in different volumes throughout the mix. Again, you could automate this. There's no problem with that. So this is part of the 8Do's Hybrid Tools 2 percussion patch, and I'm using the taiko swell short. So let's take a listen to what I have here. Right, so sounds a little low. Let's see, let me play it on the keyboard. C and F. Oh, wrong one here. There we go. Okay, so that's what we're playing here. So that's the little swell effect I have towards the end. Right in the beginning, I have the loudest taiko swell. It's using the same patch. Again, I just duplicated them because I was being lazy on writing some volume automation. But it's the same idea. But I'm using, let's see, F3 and F. Okay, so I'm using these 2. Right, so they have a really nice tail to it. And has really good impact. So that's how the song begins. It has a bass drop, which we're gonna look at, and then I have a little bit of a taiko swells in here. Again, still Hybrid Tool 2 with the percussion patch using the short swells. It does have a little bit of reverb and a little bit of that distortion, which is called transform, which gives it that tube quality to it. Not really a distortion, but enough bite to give it that nice tube sound, make it kind of like clip a little bit. All right. So now we have another taiko swell, which is again the same exact 2 notes, but it's softer. Again, I got a little bit lazy there. So moving on to the downer, which is the bass drop. I'm using Hybrid Tools 1. Let's see what I'm using. Okay, so Hybrid Tools 1, the patch is called Downers, and I'm using the preset Downers Clean. The Downers Gritty would just give you a little bit more of a distorted downer, but I chose a clean downer. And in the effects section, all I have is a little bit of that tube preset there, and then a little bit of reverb as well. So let's see which one I used. C2, so C sharp 2. Right, so that's pretty much the downer there. And again, if you're listening through a phone, it's probably going to sound a little weird. I would recommend using a pair of headphones or speakers that have good sub frequency. So you're able to hear that. So this is the downer, and again, I really focus on what notes I'm playing because these patches have multiple sounds in them. So they have different downers. That's why you have to play a specific key for this. And again, it was the C sharp 2, the lowest one here. Well, the second lowest one. So that is the downer. Okay, so next I have the Hybrid Tools. This is Hybrid Tool 1. And I'm using the Rhythms patch and the Rhythms High 2 preset. So let's see what I have going on here. Let's see which one I used. I used C. No, sorry, not C. F sharp 3. So here. Alright, so that is that little rhythm that I have going on, as well as another one that we're going to check out right now. but this is you hear it kind of pulsing in the background, which kind of gives that drive in the music as well. It adds a nice touch to it instead of just leaving it with the patches and you know, the chords, the arpeggios. There's a lot of pulsing instruments in the score, so it kind of gives it a more feeling like it's alive, like it's actually breathing. So the next hybrid tools that I have, rhythm. Again, this is hybrid tools 1, the rhythm patch with the rhythm mid 2 preset, and I am using, again, both of these I'm not really using much effects, just what comes with it. The degrader has a little bit of distortion, transform with the 2 preset, and then the reverb. And I am using D sharp 4, so this one here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to hear a little bit of a combination of these. I'm going to play the rhythm section, I'm going to play the melody so you can hear it, and then we'll go ahead and we'll listen to the entire thing again. But before we do that, we got to look at the plugins as well. So let's go ahead and just look at really quick the rhythm section of it. So I'm going to play the hybrid tools, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the drum kit so we can hear how that all plays out together. So this is the hybrid tools rhythm rhythm presets. All right, you get the idea. And again, it's a short score, so I'll play a good amount of it. So that is the hybrid tools rhythm patch. Now we're gonna go ahead and add the hard kick and the drum kit so we can hear what it sounds like together. Alright, so that is pretty much the basis of the rhythm section. Of course, we have other rhythm instruments in here, but this is like the core rhythm section I have in the song. So now we're going to go ahead and add to that the bass, the pulsing bass that I have. I'm going to go ahead and put both of them, the bass, the lower octave, and the higher octave so you can hear it. So here it goes. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and add the arpeggios that I have here. Alright, so you're seeing that it's now all these elements together, they start to make a really nice blend. They have a nice blend with each other. And again, it was carefully choosing out which sounds are going to blend together, because most of these sounds are actually in the same frequency spectrum. They have a lot of lows, they have a lot of mids. So it was really about finding the right arrangement, how to arrange all the instruments so they can all be heard, as well as choosing the right, patches to do their job in this score. So now I'm gonna go ahead and add the pads in, not the epic lead, just the pad which has a little bit of the melody in there. starting to sound like music now. So now we're gonna go ahead and go to the epic lead. I'm gonna add it in there so you can see how now it adds that flavor where it really now brings out the melody of the song, because the pad is a little bit dark. So now I need something a little bit brighter to kind of continue that melody. And again, we're doing it all without the downers and the taiko swells, because those are the little embellishments that give the song some drive. So now you're just going to hear the core song without any of those embellishments. Okay, so again, the epic lead wasn't so epic, but it was a little bit on the low side when it comes to volume, but it was just enough to kind of give that flavor, that extra flavor that the song needed. So now we're gonna go ahead and add in. Well, let's just hear them by themselves, and then we're gonna go ahead and add them in to the track so you can see what it sounds like. So here are just the embellishments, just the swells and the downers that I have to give the track a little bit more excitement. Okay, so those are the embellishments. As you can see, without the music, they sound pretty boring. So now we're going to hear the entire track again, and we're going to see all those elements being put together. All right, very cool. So now we're going to go into the mixer to kind of see what I did to make the track a little bit larger in the stereo field, and not so, because notice how here not a lot of my instruments are panned, but I still have some kind of image. So there was only a few, like 3 here, instruments that I kind of panned a little bit. So I did the pulsing bass, but the octave higher. I panned it about -25, so that's to the left. And then the hybrid tools, the actual pulsing instruments that we looked at, I have one going left 20, and then the other one going right 20, even pan on both sides. So you can see here, I don't really have much plugins going on here. Most of these sounds don't even need it, just because they sound really good straight out of the box. But if you want to go ahead and you do have these programs and tweak them, you can go ahead and feel free to tweak them to get, even more possibilities. But I stuck with the, in-house, in the box presets. So in the Super Void, which is the pad sound, just so you can hear it again. Alright, so there's a pad sound. I have the Waves S1 imager, so I kind of moved the width knob right here. So normally it'd be like around here, right? So what I kind of did was I opened it up just a little bit, about like right there, to kind of open it up in the stereo field. So if I play it bypassed, here's what it sounds like. Right, let me hold it down with the pedal. And now I'm going to go ahead and enable it. Automatically you hear that it kind of opens up. It kind of separates itself and leaves a little bit of space in the middle of the mix, which is for the epic lead, which is the main melody of the song. And then also I used a channel EQ on this, so let's see what I did here. So this patch had a little bit of a lot of ring in the mid frequency, so I pulled that down about -3 dB, and then I completely rolled off the low end up to 124 hertz, simply because I already have a sub kick, kicking in the lower frequencies. I have a pulsing bass that's already taking over the lower frequencies, so I'm giving the space to the instruments that actually need or that actually give a pleasant lower frequency sound, not really the patch. So here's the patch without the EQ alterations. So this is without. Here's with. Without. Right, so you can hear that it sounds good without the EQ, but in the mix, in the context of the mix, when the EQ is on, it really allows that space to come in and doesn't really take up that much space. Because again, this is not the only track I have that has low frequencies. So on its own, sure, you could take out the EQ, but with everything else, with the EQ, I think it's best for the mix. Just because you can also hear that lower frequency isn't really doing much to help the mix anyways. So on the next track, which is the epic lead, I literally have nothing on there. So next we have the hard kick, which is, all I have in it is the FG Red compressor from Slate Digital, with a threshold of -4.9 dB and a ratio of 2.0, with the auto release on, and then a 4.0 attack on it. No makeup gain, just as is. And that's pretty much it for that. For the drum kit, I have nothing on it. The arpeggios does have the stereo imager. I like showing off the stereo imager, just because you can hear the power that this plugin has, and I used it quite a few times in this track. So the arpeggios, as you can see, it's extremely wide here in the frequency, in the stereo spectrum. Sorry. So let's go ahead and listen to it bypassed really quick. Now with it. Bypassed. And then with it. Alright, so it kind of does the job of having either, two mono tracks and panning it left and right, or, bouncing it out, putting it back in as a stereo wave, and then, panning it left to right. It kind of does the same exact thing, except it's inside one plugin. All I did was spread it out, and it automatically gets removed from the center, even though there is some sound coming from the center, but you mostly hear it on the left and right sides. Now, in a professional mix, I would bounce it out and then do the actual panning. That way I can completely remove it from the center. But since this is a short 30-second clip for an Instagram post, I just went ahead and took a little shortcut and used the Stereo One imager to kind of create the same effect without having to go through the long process of bouncing it out, putting it back in, then doing all the panning. So I did it all in one plugin, so this is an option to do it. So next, I have the pulsing bass. So this is the lower octave one, and I did actually roll off a little bit of the really sub frequencies and left the low frequencies in there. So I cut it off at around 70 with a 24 dB octave slope. And the reason why I did that is because, again, I have the hard kick, and then I also have the downers and the taikos, and I really want those things to be prominent in the really low sub-frequencies between 40 and 70 hertz. So I kind of left this in the 80 hertz range, which is mostly where the bass is really supposed to be, around the 80 range. Anything below 80 is what we call the sub frequency. So we let the subwoofer handle that. And I use it for things like downers, which really need the extra power in the sub frequencies. So I rolled it off, and that's pretty much all I did. So actually, let's take a listen to it without the roll off. Now with the roll off. Without. With. So automatically, if you're listening through a good pair of headphones or speakers, you can really hear that the sub frequencies are being controlled because of this roll off. And again, I have my reasons for doing that. If, let's say, this was my only source of bass, then I'll probably, leave the bass to have those sub frequencies to cover that ground. But since I do have other instruments using the sub frequencies that kind of live down there and they sound best down there, I'm gonna cut it off in this instance. So moving on to the next one that has a plugin, which is my Tycho swells. So I only have a compressor on the really loud Tycho swell, which is the first one, the intro, just because it's the loudest and I want it to be controlled so when all the instruments come in, it doesn't overpower the other instruments. It allows the instruments to come out. Because again, since it's a swell, the loudest point is going to be where the instruments come in. So I put a compressor on it, and as you can see, the threshold is at negative 22.9 dB, and then we have a ratio of 2. So I'm pushing it pretty hard. This is 0 dB, so I'm pushing it down pretty hard in order to get, again, I want the instruments to be heard, so I want it to duck down enough, but still have the impact, so when the music comes in, it doesn't overpower. And again, I have the auto release feature on it. So that's pretty much all I did there. Moving on to the downer. Again, all I have is a compressor, and of course, I put a compressor on it at 11.4 dB threshold with a 2.0 ratio and auto release, just simply to keep the bass tight. I don't want it to kind of poke out in different places, just to keep it nice and tight all the way through the downer. So that's pretty much it for that. Okay, so next we have the hybrid tools. We have it panned already, and I do have an S1 imager just to kind of push it out a little more. The reason to why I did that instead of just panning it through is because when I was doing the mix, I panned it first, but then I kind of wanted more width, and so I don't have to pan it all the way left and right. I gave myself some wiggle room to play around with, so I put the S1 imager in here to kind of have a little bit more control as to where exactly I want it in the stereo field. So here is the hybrid tools with the Stereo 1 imager bypassed, and then I'm going to go ahead and enable it. Okay, so it doesn't do much, but it does give the sense that it is farther now into the stereo field. As you can hear, even in when it's doing the ping pong effect, it sounds louder when it jumps from the speakers to one another. So it sounds loud on the left, loud on the right. When it's bypassed, you kind of lose a little bit of that volume. So we're going to go ahead and look at the hybrid tools, the other hybrid tools I have, which is the mid one. And again, I do have the stereo imager, and as you can see, I have it pulled again pretty far out. So I'm going to do it bypass and then enabled. Okay, so with this one, you could definitely hear that it gets louder on the right side, which is where it's panned. This one doesn't really have a ping pong effect, but you can hear that it gets a lot louder on the right side. So the last thing we're going to cover is the stereo bus here, or the stereo out. Usually you would bounce the track out, put it back in a project, and then master it there. But again, this was an Instagram post, so I just went ahead and did a little bit of a mastering here in the same project. So again, I used another stereo imager in the last one to kind of get a little bit more definition in the stereo field with all the instruments. So I'm gonna go ahead and play it, bypass, and then with it on. Bypassed. And with it on. So the elements that are panned, you can hear that now they sound even farther out in the mix. So it kind of gives it a little bit of room to move around. And again, I just opened it up a little bit because again, the track already has some kind of image. I don't want to open it too much. So then it kind of sounds like everything is to the left and right. I still want to keep my instruments that are centered. So I just opened it up just a little bit. Okay, so next we have, I have a stereo compressor here, again from Slate Digital. This is the FG-MU. I have the input at 5.2 with the threshold actually right at 0. So pretty much it's just giving it a little bit of compression. So let's actually take a look at the meters here. So you see, it's probably not even moving except right at the beginning. So now we're going to take a look at the compressor. Now I just have it here for safekeeping. This is just a safety net in case anything decides to poke out before I put it in the actual limiter and raise the volume. This is literally just a safety net, and it's mostly for the embellishments that I have, like the swells and the downers, not really the music itself, because dynamically it's actually very flat. There's not really much loud soft, so I don't need to worry about like really high peaks except for the downers and stuff, which is like right in the beginning. So check this out here. So that's pretty much it. It's just that initial hit. That's all I have it for. I don't even have a high threshold. I have it right on 0. So it's literally just saying if anything decides to poke out at 0, it's going to go ahead and squash it down a little bit. I have the attack at 2.0 and then the release at 2.0 as well. So that's pretty much a safety net. It's not really doing much, to be honest. And then I have the L3 multi-maximizer, which is my limiter. It's a multi-band compressor in a way. Well, it is. And you can see the frequencies here. So all I did was I boosted a little bit of highs to get some presence. And then I rolled off a little bit of the lows because it was a little bit too much. And I just wanted a little bit less to kind of make it sound nice, full, but not too overpowering. So let's go ahead and take a listen to it. Bypass. Now the overall volume is going to drop because again, this is giving it most of the volume. So let's go ahead and see what it's doing. Bypassed. With it. Without. Right, so you could definitely hear, obviously there's a volume difference because again, it's bringing the volume up and I have the out ceiling at 0, so I'm really just pushing it up to 0, which is the max before it starts to clip. Even though it turns red in here, it's not really clipping, it's just staying right at 0. But I have the volume difference, but you can also hear that I actually mixed everything very low in volume. I actually raised the volume on my monitor and mixed very low. So that's something you should really practice doing. Don't mix too loud because then you have no space to do the mastering. I actually mixed very low, and let's see how low. So I'm about -8 dB. That's pretty much where I am. So it gives me enough room to do a lot of mastering, or not really a lot of mastering, but mastering enough to have room and make it sound good, and then push the volume up. You never want to mix already hitting it at 0 dB, -1 dB, because then the mastering engineer or whoever's mastering it won't be able to do much to it, or whether it's give a little bit more bass frequency, hype in the bass frequencies, or give a little bit more on the higher frequencies. They just won't have enough room. So you definitely want to mix low and then let the mastering engineer be the one to go ahead and even it out, which is the final product here. Right, so you can see that it's at 0, and it's just gonna stay at 0. It's not gonna pass that. So now we're gonna go ahead and listen to the entire track again from beginning to end. Thank you so much for watching. If you found the information of this video helpful, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly videos. Don't forget to share with your musician friends. I will see you all soon.